Representative Garcia, immigrant to immigrant. This talk it really bothers you. You've got a lot of different. You're sort of the definition of intersectionality. You've got a lot of ways in which you identify as a member of Congress, as an American, as a gay man, as a politician, and as an immigrant. This hatred talk about immigrants is getting under your skin.
It's infuriating. I mean, I am so sick of Donald Trump and his anti-immigrant rhetoric, the way he just attacks us over and over and over again. And I came to this country as a young child. I was an educator, a teacher in the classroom for 10 years. I became a member of Congress. I became a citizen in my early 20s. I'm a patriot. I love this country. My family are immigrants. So this idea that somehow immigrants haven't helped build this country or contribute is a warped reality that Donald Trump lives in. He is doing this to get to his base. He is doing this to encourage the worst in people. What he is saying is completely anti-American. He is running a campaign that is the opposite of our values, the opposite of what this country was actually built upon. And so I am sick and tired. Immigrants are sick and tired of being essentially his playthings. He always scapegoats our issues. He treats people in our community this way, and we're tired of it. We've got to rid ourselves of Donald Trump. It is time for us to defeat him one last time. We've got to unite to do so. Michael
Beschloss, as a guy who thinks about this economically, I always think, boy, if we just look at the math, we need a lot of immigrants in this country. Mm-hmm. But as Rachel pointed out earlier, historically, this is a thing. Politicians in America have capitalized on anti-immigrant sentiment with every group of immigrants that's come through this country, bar none. And it has been done to effect in the past. It's both been done in America in the past, and it's certainly been done, as you and I have discussed, by dictators and authoritarians in other parts of the world. Why is Donald Trump, other than the fact that it has worked in the past, what do you think is behind this increasing volume in the rhetoric, the racist rhetoric that Donald Trump is using?
I agree with you that Donald Trump probably has not read the history of the know-nothings in the mid-19th century that campaigned against immigrants and Catholics, and certainly did not like black people, and certainly didn't like Jewish people. And all that is also true of the Ku Klux Klan at its height in the 1920s. Yes, I will concede that Donald Trump has not read that history, but he does know that this works. We have every reason to assume that he believes this. His first wife reported that he was fascinated by Hitler's speeches. If you go back to his announcement speech at Trump Tower 2015, the way he talked about Mexican-American immigrants and Mexicans who were coming here, it sounded very much like an echo of Hitler's language in Mein Kampf in 1925. But at the same time, Trump is always someone who wants to see, how do you succeed? How do you become powerful? He was 22 years old in 1968. His family was in Queens. George Wallace ran as a segregationist, got at one point during the fall of 1968, 25% of Americans with his racist and segregationist rhetoric. But most of all, Ali, no president, no major party candidate for president in the last 100 years has ever spoken the way that Donald Trump did in the last few days, talking about poisoning the blood, other occasions talking about vermin. This is something that separates him from all of American history in the last 100 years, at least presidential history. Let's remember that and take it extremely seriously.
I think that's important. Representative Garcia, one of the things that Michael and I have talked about in the past, and others and I have talked about in the past, is that if it were only just Donald Trump, it would be one thing. There are, and I played it earlier, there are lots of opportunities that Republicans are given in the House, on television shows, to denounce this kind of conversation, to distance themselves from this conversation. At best, you'll get a don't pay attention to the language, or that's just Trump being Trump. At some point, the Republican Party has to be held to account for the fact that they let this continue to happen.
It's just incredible, the hold that Donald Trump has on the entire party. I mean, the entire Republican Party, particularly the leadership, is essentially turned into one big MAGA show. I mean, they do whatever Donald Trump wants. I mean, that clip of Lindsey Graham is a coward. He should be ashamed of himself for not being able to stand up to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump now pulls the strings in the Senate, in the House of Representatives. He has everyone that he wants in power. His lieutenants are in charge, and it's the Donald Trump show all the time in Washington, D.C. So it's really important for us right now across the country to listen to what Donald Trump is saying. He is telling us he wants to be a dictator. He is telling us he wants to be an authoritarian. He is telling us what he thinks of people that are diverse and different and people that built this country. And so he is laying out his plan for what a second Donald Trump term would look like. And that should concern every American in this country. And we should be calling out all of these Republicans and the hypocrites that that right now are ruling the MAGA extreme GOP. It's just a shame they're not standing up to them.
The rest of us are going to have to. This is not partisan politics. This is about, as you said, Representative Garcia, our actual values. Thanks to both of you, gentlemen. Robert Garcia is the congressman from California. He's a member of the House Oversight and Homeland Security Committees. Michael Beschloss, of course, is our favorite historian.